Okay. Okay. Okay, let's get started. Until I get a question, let me just talk about the fact that we've got a bunch of seminars scheduled, which we hadn't until recently. I have been mostly avoiding scheduling seminars because we've been concentrating on getting the website ready, writing books. We've been working on some preparing for some television specials and so on. But we have a seminar in Washington, in the Washington, D.C. area. If you go to the website, you can see these. End of April. There's a 2-day Real Love Immersion, first week in May. If you have an interest in being exposed to an intensive 2-day exposure to real love for any reason, you just want to be around real love people, you want to certify as a real love coach, whatever, broad variety of reasons, that is the event to go to. And the website will tell you more about that. There's going to be a seminar in Salt Lake City, second week of May. Going to be another seminar end of May, first part of June, 2 of them in Orange County, California. And then another seminar first week of June, second week of June, I guess, in Boca Raton, Florida. So lots of stuff going on. And then over the next 3 weeks, Don and I are going to be on a cruise with one of our children who works on a cruise ship. And so we're going to be visiting with him, and so we're going to be in exotic, crazy places like Dubai and Egypt and Jerusalem and Istanbul and crazy places I've never been. And that starts this coming week, and so for the next 3 weeks, the master of real love, Jonathan's going to be here filling in, and that'll be a treat for everybody. He's very good at this. Question that we have here: is there a real love way to respond when a coworker shares her anger, in other words, her anger about another coworker with you? Specifically, I was asked, what would your gut reaction be if he did that to you? Oh, what a great opportunity to teach somebody about real love. In fact, it's really common that people gossip about other people. I don't know if that was the context, but you know, people will say, well, he did this and he did that, and I'm so mad, and usually they won't even ask you, what would your reaction be? They just sort of want to gripe. It's a wonderful opportunity to teach people something. Now, if you defend the person that they're angry at, they're not going to hear you. You have to really listen to them. And so the first thing is to say, boy, I can sure understand why you would feel that way. Because let's say that the other person was, I don't know, thoughtless. If you could give me more details, I can be more specific. But let's say that they were complaining that somebody, was critical of them. And so you'd say, in my experience, when people get angry, it's always about their feeling unloved. Because the thing that we want more than anything on the planet is to feel loved. And I know that in my own experience, that when people get angry at me, the message I hear is, I don't love you. And that's the message I believe that we all hear. Right here with you. If I were to, while you and I were talking, now mind you, I'm playing your part. So I'm playing your part in talking to this coworker. Right here, as you and I are talking, if I were to, instead of listening to you, become angry at you, as soon as I become angry, my concern is for who? It's for me. At which point you know that my primary concern isn't for you. And the minute you feel like I don't care about you, what do you hear? You hear, I don't love you. And in that moment, that's hurtful. And you're going to respond either by withdrawing, feeling like a victim, feeling angry at me, something. And so I guess my suggestion is that this person did something that was unloving, certainly. No justifying that. I'm just explaining that that's why you're feeling angry. And I know that in the times that I feel sufficiently loved myself, when somebody does something like that, it doesn't bother me at all. When I don't feel loved, it does bother me. So when you ask me, how would I feel? Depends on whether I feel loved or not. And then you can tell them the story, for example, that you find in the Real Love book about the $2 million, $20 million. And that's an easy story to tell people. You say, if I took $2 from you and it was your last $2, how would you feel? You'd hate it. If I took $2 from you and you had $20 million, wouldn't bother you as much, would it? And that's what it feels like to have real love. We feel like we have $20 million with us all the time. Then, when people do those little snotty, inconsiderate things that people just do, it doesn't bother us as much. So it's a great chance to teach somebody about real love. And notice that in this whole explanation, you haven't made that person wrong. You didn't make the other person wrong. You just explained why it is the way it is. People can hear that. Whereas when you say wrong or you say you should have, boy, people have a real hard time hearing that. So let me know if that makes sense to you. Here's somebody who says, hi Greg, I'm getting in touch with my inner schoolyard kid. That is, I'm completely resistant to reaching out for more connection or more real love in my life. Though that is exactly what I need to be doing right now to counteract my tendency to isolate. My coach is urging me to make calls, and I feel like a cowering little girl hiding onto the sidelines who thinks nobody will like me, nobody wants to talk to me, I'm weird, will anybody want to play with me, will anybody want to talk to me? I'm used to waiting to see if people will approach me rather than reaching out. And it just feels too scary to make cold calls. I feel tongue-tied, and I don't know how to ask for attention, let alone love and advice. Any suggestions? Oh, sure. These are not cold calls, and that's the important thing for you to get. If your coach surely has given you the names of some wise men or women to call, I assume. And you need to understand that every one of those people has been where you are, including me. I mean, the first 20 times that I went to call somebody to talk about myself, I felt like a kid, calling for his first date. I would dial the first, of course, in those days you didn't have to dial the area code, but I would dial the first 6 numbers and then hang up. And this was calling another man. It was embarrassing. You're talking here about nobody wanted to talk to me. Nobody liked you. Remember that rhyme? Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm going to eat some worms. That's how I felt. And there's only one way around that, and that is to take that initial step. Call these people and say, and one of the things that frightens you is, what do you say? So remember, the person that you're calling already knows how you feel. You're not just cold calling somebody who doesn't know what's going on. These people have already made these calls. And then you call them up and you say, hello, my name is whatever. And frightened Susie. And I'm calling because, my coach suggested I call somebody and I don't even know what to say. You just say, I don't know what to say. They will take it from there. They'll take care of you. Really. So all you have to do is reach out and then they'll take your hand. So if you can believe that, it will go pretty well. Really. And if your coach didn't give you some names, let me know. And we'll see if we can help your coach. But it gets lots less scary when you realize that those people are there to help you. They will. Somebody said, is the China trip still on? That was actually the suggestion of somebody else. It wasn't really something we were putting on. So it's not really a matter of whether the China trip's on. It was never really on. Dubai is fun. Make sure to have some hubbly bubbly, whatever that is, while drinking your fruit juice of choice. Somebody's going to have to tell me what hubbly bubbly is. And ride a horse, not a camel. I believe you. Here's somebody who says, follow up on the reaching out. I have not been reaching out much lately by the way of phone calls. I do share with others as much as possible or as much as they will allow without pressure or me being right about getting and protecting behaviors each and every day. Cool. I mean, if you can do it in person, you sure don't need to do it on the phone. Could it be that I'm actually running because it is safer not to call others that my coach told me to call, and that I feel power when I try to talk to others face-to-face about real love? If you're talking to people about real love who are completely new at real love, then you're probably in a position of power. You probably are in a position where you're teaching them. And you do need to have some experience of talking to people who have more experience than you do. Because we do have a tendency to run from people who are wiser, who might make observations about us that we don't want to hear. Does that make sense? So I'm not telling you that you're running, but there is the possibility that you might be, since anytime you say, I've been avoiding something, you might be. So, I would at least try it. I would try calling some more experienced wise people just to see if they might have some observations about your behavior, feelings, and so on that you might not make on your own. Whereas when you call inexperienced people, there's no way they're going to make those observations. Just like it's very often that I'll be talking to people who are fairly new in real love, and I'll say, so, do you call people? Are you making phone calls? Oh, yeah, I talk to somebody every day. Well, I don't ever let that go. Who do you call? Oh, well, I call my sister and my mom. I mean, these are the people who put them there. These are almost invariably the people who got them to the place where they are in their lives. So usually these are not the people who are going to get you out of that place. Or they say, I talked to my friend Susie. Well, is Susie likely to say to you, when you talk about your husband, maybe you ought to talk about yourself and not just talk about your husband or complain about the boss? Or is Susie strong enough to stop you when you're acting like a victim? Well, no, probably not. Well, then what good is it going to do to call Susie? I mean, just simply calling somebody who's willing to listen to us complain, that's not going to help us grow. So just any old call isn't good enough. We really need to talk to people capable of hearing the truth about us, capable of telling the truth about us if we're not capable of telling it, and making a difference. So just calling isn't enough. So this is from the person who is saying, who is asking about being afraid to make the phone calls. I get what you're saying about wise men and women being prepared to receive calls from new people like myself, but I can't even get to the place of picking up the phone. I was raised to feel like I'm definitely too much trouble. Don't ask for anything. Don't bother anybody. I'm already too much of a bother, you know. I really do feel that I'll be bothering anybody I call, even if they should happen to be sitting by the phone just waiting for me to call them. They probably would prefer to talk to anybody other than me. Oh boy, I didn't even know I felt this way until under the spotlight of the Real Love material. Any further words of advice? Sure. I really get how you feel. I mean, many of us have been told that we are so much of a bother that we don't even dare pick up the phone. I used to be terrified that I would call somebody and that I would say, hello, this is Greg. And what they would say is the horrifying words, Greg who? That just scared me to death. Or you'd sort of hear this like sigh at the other end, like, it's him again. So I understand. I get it. So what would I do? I'm not just going to tell you, oh, be brave and buck up and call people, because I know that's scary. And if you're that frightened, I follow you. So what I would do is this. You mentioned that you have a coach. Good for you. So I would say to my coach, and you need to type in here that... you need to type in here if this doesn't make sense to you. But if you're still talking to your coach, you need to say to your coach, look, I am terrified spitless about calling people. I just can't do it. I'm gutless. I have no spine. I'm yellow from top to bottom. I can't do it. Don't disguise it. And say, so here's what I need. Would you be willing, to your coach, would you be willing to call a couple of these people and ask them to call me and explain to them that I'm just too afraid, and explain to them that I really need them to follow up and call. So try that. If that doesn't work, you send me an email, greg@reallove.com, really, and put down here your nickname so I remember, and remind me of this phone conversation, and I'll call you. Okay? Are we clear? Are we good? Will this help? Another person here says, I was talking about how when you first go to tell the truth about yourself, you don't go to your mom and dad, your brother and your sister. And he was saying this is true about family. They're very, very resistant. He says, I tell them the truth about myself and they look at me in disbelief, or they cry, or they get angry. In fact, I tell people in the beginning, look, love your family. There's no blaming of family here. That's just stupid. That just makes you resentful, and that doesn't help anybody. But your family is how you got where you are. Hello? And so if they got you where you are, how do you expect them to get out of where you are? That ain't going to happen. So we really need to get help from the outside. And some families will even like, well, you're betraying the family by talking to other people. Oh, tough. I mean, if you had cancer, would you go to the family and say, I need chemo? No. You get help from the outside, and the same thing here. And then the more love you get, the more love you can take back to your family. But there's no blaming of them. They just don't have what it takes. It's simple. There's no criticizing. Barbara says, it really bothers me that my next door neighbor doesn't want to be friends with me. Our kids play a lot. And she's friends with lots of other moms on the block. What am I missing? You know, I would certainly make an effort to be her friend. It would help me if you described what you've done to be a friend with her. You know, I would, I don't know, invite her over, talk about books you've read, ask about her kids, go out and talk to her in the yard, pick flowers from your yard and take them over in a vase. I'd make 4 or 5 attempts to be her friend. And if after that she doesn't continue the association, oh, here we go. I've brought her veggies from my garden, joined her book club. Well then, honey, it's like this in every relationship. And I do this with any relationship I'm in. I make an effort to befriend somebody, and you do the same in dating. And then after you've put effort into it, you simply gather information. Whereas we spend our whole lives trying to make relationships where there can't be one. I mean, if I put effort into a relationship, then I just watch what happens. And I have no attachment to the outcome. So if I put something into it and the other person doesn't respond 2 or 3 times in a row, let me think. What are they telling me? I don't want a relationship with you. I got it. This is very simple. And my response to them is, thank you very much. It saves me the time of repeated efforts, and I move on to have a relationship with somebody where my efforts will be more fruitful. This is pretty simple. It makes dating pretty easy, for example. I get calls all the time. How do I get this person to be more interested in me? You don't. If you've already put, and sometimes they'll do this after, 6 months of dating. Are you joking? You put 3 or 4 efforts into it, and then if they're not reciprocating, you're done. This isn't complicated. So just let her go. Do not assume that it's about you. It's no indictment of you. Maybe you remind her of her 2nd grade teacher and she hated her. Who knows? I mean, it could be a million different reasons. Maybe she's simply telling you that she's incapable of having an unconditionally loving relationship with anybody. Who knows what the reason is? Maybe you have the same name as her aunt who once stuck a fork in her leg. I mean, you don't know. You have no idea. Let it go. Move on to somebody else. Here's somebody who says, how does emailing versus calling affect telling the truth about ourselves? In the beginning of a relationship, emailing's cool. In fact, emailing sometimes is a great way to start telling the truth about ourselves because it's kind of anonymous, I mean, we can often say things about ourselves by email that we wouldn't say in person. So in some ways, it's kind of safer and it's really not bad at all. In fact, it's a great way to start dating. So there's really kind of similarities. So nice start, but it's never enough. So after you've emailed somebody telling the truth for a little bit, you pretty much have to go to phone calls. And then after a while, telling the truth in person is pretty irreplaceable, which is why we recommend Real Love groups, which is why we have these Real Love immersions in Dallas in April, May, something. Wait a minute. Hang on. Computer. In first week of May. It's why we provide live experiences. It's why we have this, why we add visual to audio. The more personal that you can make it, the more sensory and spiritual input that you can provide, the more loved you feel. That's all. It just gets cooler. Here's the lady who says, where we were talking about she was going to ask her coach to call some people and have the other people, the wise men and women, call her, and she says she thinks that would work. So, neat. So I think we've gotten to the end of the questions that have backed up so far. Love having you all here. These are just a hoot. If you're not going to be coming to Dallas yourself, first week of May, let some people know. These are often, for people who have not had a live experience with real love, these are life-changing experiences. People are profoundly affected by being just around other people who are loving. Those of you who have been to such events, certainly there's a benefit to being around when we're all gathered as a group, and we're doing demonstrations of real love, we're talking about it and so on. But when we break for drinks and that sort of thing, gosh, we can't get people gathered back together. People just enjoy being with each other and having the feeling of real love. We did one recently that was a 2-day immersion in Phoenix, somewhere. And somebody who knew nothing about real love came in toward the end of the seminar for some other reason. I don't remember the reason. But they came in to the room and sat there for just a few minutes, and then when the seminar was all over, said to me, there was such a loving energy in the room. They could feel that. And that's what we get when we associate with loving people. So the more we're around that, the better. Here's a man who says, from a partner standpoint, I'm confused about moving on. Right now, I avoid my wife because I don't want to put effort where there could be no real love in the relationship. This is a man who is in the process of going through a divorce. I know she has a coach, and she has started to tell the truth about herself. If I avoid her, it seems that moving on from her from your viewpoint is the thing to do. I avoid her from a safety point of view. So I guess your question is, since you're approaching a divorce, how to approach your wife? Let me know if I'm missing your question. I would suggest that until your marriage is actually over, until she's your ex-wife, you ask her what she wants. Instead of avoiding her, why make the decision for her? I see people do this all the time. Well, I'm doing this with that person because I think whatever. And why think it? Why not ask them? So why not go to your wife and say, here, I know you have a coach. I know you're learning about real love. I'm enjoying real love. What kind of involvement with me do you want? Now, you'd also need to say, in the past, I have been very clingy, and I have tried to grab onto you and save our marriage. That's not my goal anymore. I'm really asking you, what do you want? And if you ask it with no expectations, I think she'll be stunned. And then I think she'll give you a real answer. So you decide. You decide to ask her, and then she'll decide what she wants to do in return. Find out. Here's Catherine. I'm here with my niece Maya, who is reading Real Love. Yesterday I spent time with my daughter, hello Maya, and grandson at a horse show. I could see how the principles are working as I could hear things differently. My grandson was saying, "You are mean to me. And I could hear, I don't feel loved. It changed my response to a much more loving way. Yes! When we hear that it's always about real love, everything changes. Here's this little kid saying, "You're mean to me." And then what we tend to do is come back with, "No, I'm not being mean to you." We're arguing about absolutely meaningless details. The kid is saying, "I don't feel loved." So what do you say instead? "So what is it you need from me?" That's what he wants to hear. Or like I was talking to a couple just earlier today, and her child would say to her, "I hate you, you're a terrible mother." And what he's really saying is, "I don't feel loved by you." So when he says, "You're a terrible mother," what has she been taught all of her life to say to her child? Guess. She would say, "Don't," it's so stupid, "don't talk to your mother like that." So here's a kid who's already not feeling loved, and then what do you say to him? "Don't talk to me like that." What? In other words, how does that come across to the kid? He already doesn't feel loved, and now we're saying, "And I can't love you while you talk to me like that." Good grief, we make it much worse. So what do you say to a child when a child says, "You're a mean, terrible mother"? Well, it's easy. Lots of different things you could say, but you could say, "Oh, I know. I've been a terrible mother your whole life long." Or you just, laugh at it. Or you could just reach over and that's what I taught this woman to do, and she did this. The next time, she reached over to this child, and when the child said, "You're a mean, terrible mother," she just reached over and hugged him and just patted his head, and she said, all of the prickly, tense energy in him just went, whew. It just vanished. Because remember, all the kid is saying is, "You don't love me." And so what did she do? She loved him. There's no sense telling a kid, "Don't talk to me like that," because that's like saying, "Don't feel like that." Or if saying to somebody who's drowning, "Don't drown." That's just kind of like nuts. And so she gave him what he needed, and poof, his anger was gone. So much funner. Linda says, "I made my first try at telling the truth about myself today." Ooh, this is going to be fun. I love to read people's first try, because this is like pioneering stuff. "I had overlooked something at work that I owed someone by 8 o'clock this morning. When she courteously asked me about it by email, at first I apologized and said I hadn't been aware of the due date, but that I would work on it right away. After I sent the email, I realized that I hadn't been very truthful, as opposed to marginally or slightly truthful. So I sent another email saying that I had actually not even read far enough down in her request, and that was why I was unaware of the time that she needed my response." Very cool. Isn't it fun just to tell the truth? Then you don't feel like you're hiding and sneaking around and always defending yourself. And I was talking to a couple earlier today, and he was furious at her because she was always irresponsible about a certain thing. And I said, "Well, describe your behavior." And she described her behavior, and I said, so this is your job, and you didn't do it here, and you didn't do it there, and you did it poorly here, and you ignored it there, and you forgot it there. I said, "How would you describe that behavior?" And she said, "Well, it wasn't very thorough." I said, "Wouldn't it be like irresponsible?" And she just couldn't even form the words on her lips. Finally, she said, "Yeah, I guess it is irresponsible." It was the first time she'd ever used that word relative to herself. And it was like, a relief. And you should have seen her husband. She'd been afraid to admit to her husband all their marriage that she was irresponsible because she was afraid he would beat her up with that word. And as soon as she admitted she was irresponsible, he reached over and he touched her on the knee. Oh, he was grateful to finally hear the truth. The truth really does make us free, and it brings people closer to us. It's a hoot telling the truth. So way to go, making your first try. Carol says, I'm confused and need a little direction. Me too. When you have someone in your life who is a real praise junkie, that's a lot of people, is it okay to still offer praise or gratitude when I want to show that? Every time I do, I get such a gush of thanking me for thanking them or thanking me so very much that it makes me uncomfortable. What I would suggest, and obviously you can do anything you want, but instead of praising people, what I do is I make it about them. So, for example, my son, who used to be the championship swimmer, when he did something, when he broke a school record, I would say, well, gosh, that must have been really fun. Because it's about him, not me, instead of I'm so proud of you. See, that makes it about me. Or, see, even when we say, thank you so very much, what are we doing? We're making it about who? Us. Thank you because you made me feel good. Child gets good grades. What do we say? Oh, good boy. And look at the expression on her face. Oh, good boy, you've made me happy. And instead, what I say to a kid is, it was fun to study and know more of the material, wasn't it? Did you enjoy it more this semester, studying more? Did you get more out of it? So that they understand that there's a correlation between studying harder and having more fun, or knowing more, instead of pleasing me. So if your friend does something well, you could say something like, I would say to a 4-year-old. 4-year-old brings me, my granddaughter does something well. She brings me her coloring book and she's colored. I don't say, nice job, because then I'm putting value on what she's done. She doesn't need that. In fact, studies have now proven, a bunch of studies, this is going to be in the next book that I'm doing, have proven that the more you praise somebody for doing something, the less they enjoy it and the less they do it. Because the most powerful motivation we have for doing a thing is that we just like to do it, that it's fun, that it's intrinsically enjoyable, meaningful to us. Whereas when I come along to my granddaughter, for example, and say, oh, nice job, now she feels a motivation to do it to please me. I've now taken the fun out of it. So I don't say nice job. What I say is, well, gosh, what's that? Well, show me what that is. How did you draw that? So let's say your friend does something particularly competent. You might say, well, how did you do that? How did you do that? That must have had a nice effect on those people. That must have been very useful to whatever. You simply talk about the event instead of, oh, wow, aren't you great? Or whatever. Or even like, let's say she bakes you a pie. Instead of, oh, thank you, you say, oh, honey, do I like pie? I'm going to really enjoy eating this. You're describing the effect of it. Instead of, oh, you're putting, instead of a value, oh, thank you, you made me so, all that gushing is what they live for. You take the praise out of it and simply make it, instead of praise, you turn it into, and this is important, information. And people don't get off so much on information, whereas praise, people get addicted to that. And it works with kids too. Let me know if that helps. I have a question. I have a coworker, different person here, who likes to accuse people and also report to the supervisor every chance she gets. She did this with everybody. Although I have found, after I apply real love, I've got along so much better, but I find that she still does try to do this from time to time. So I assume that she accuses people, she like accuses you of making mistakes and reports to the supervisor about you. All you can do is love her. That's it. And so you do little things like when you see her. See, when people are snotty, when people are accusatory, when they go to the supervisor and then they pass by our desk, what do? We don't talk to them. We keep our heads down. We don't look at them. If they look at us, we don't look at them with obvious glee. She knows that the people in the office hate her. She knows that. So when she walks by your office, you say, "Oh, it's so nice to see you, Myrtle," or whatever her name is. "So how are the kids?" Let me tell you, when people know that you love them, they are a whole lot less likely to criticize you, talk about you, and report you to the boss. Although that can't be the reason that you love her. If that's the reason you're loving her, you're just manipulating her. And manipulating with real love is kind of contradictory, you know? So you're loving her just because it's funner, and because it's not as fun to avoid her and to not love her. So just love her. And as you do that, you will see a difference in her behavior. But you can't control the times that she's snotty. And fighting them will not help. You go to her and you say, "I am sick and tired of the way you go and talk to the boss." She'll report that to the boss. So you're not going to stop that. Again, it's like telling somebody to quit drowning. Here's somebody who says, "Each day I'm letting go of more and more of my expectations of others. However, after your last discussion about moving on, I realized that I can have a different expectation that I did not realize. I have the expectation, I see, that I have a different expectation." There was one that he didn't understand that he did have. "I have the expectations of others reading my mind. It's a safety issue, and now I know I need to work on it. Maybe those calls to other people will help." Yeah, sure. That's a real important reason to make those calls to experienced people because, well, kind of by definition, if we're blind to a thing that we're doing, we're blind. We can't see it. We really can't. We don't make this up. And if you're blind to a thing, often, gosh, it will take years to see it. Whereas somebody who's not you, who's outside of you, I mean, come on, which of us isn't just an absolute genius at seeing the faults of everybody else? We're just great at that. And when you've got somebody who's a wise man or wise woman who's helping you see what you're doing and is actually trying to love you and help you see it, they can see the things that you do often just like that and will lovingly point them out. That's such a savings in time when somebody tells you, "Did you know that you're doing this?" Listen to them. Listen before you say, "No, I don't." Because when somebody tells you something that you're doing that doesn't personally affect them, they're probably right 90+% of the time. Because why else would they tell you? They're trying to help you. Catherine asks, actually Maya wants to know, how do you know when you have a martyr complex? Easy. 2 words. Disappointment and irritation. If you walk around much of the time feeling disappointed in people's behavior, like, oh, they've let me down, people let me down, or even if you feel irritated most of the time, what are you saying? The instant you're irritated, what you're saying is, look what other people did to me. Or look what other people should have done for me. It's all about being a victim. And what I would really suggest to you, if you want to learn a lot about being a martyr, is go online and get the book called, it's an ebook right now, called Real Love and Freedom for the Soul. And the entire book is about martyrs. It's about victims. Victimhood is just an absolute epidemic in our society today. People think that they've been wounded, and let me tell you, once somebody feels like they've been wounded, they feel justified in taking it out on everybody. And those are pretty dangerous people. So victimhood is pretty dangerous stuff. Jill says, I had a friend over the other night. I was telling her about real love. She likes the idea, but she doesn't believe in loving the wicked people. People who are mean. I don't know how to explain to her further. What will you say to make them better understand? Well, if we only like the nice people, it wouldn't be unconditional love, would it? Another way to explain it is that wicked people, what she calls mean people, they're mean. Why? Show her how all of the mean behaviors are just getting and protecting behaviors. Or if you want, you could illustrate it in a real short period of time and say, if I reached over and started choking you, how would you behave? And if we were at a formal dinner, let's say we were at a formal affair, everybody's all dressed up and behaving nicely, and if I reached over and started choking you, would your behavior be consistent with the behavior of a formal dinner? No. In fact, you'd be behaving insanely. You'd be kicking and thrashing and acting like a crazy person. Would you be acting like that because you're bad? Because you're wicked or mean? In fact, in your kicking with somebody choking you, you'd very likely hit the people on either side of you. So, is that because you're a bad person, or is it because you're being choked? It's because you're being choked. And people who behave badly are simply reacting to the fact that they're in pain. So those are the very people who need not just to be loved, they're the people who need to be loved most. Goodness doesn't believe in loving mean people. Those are the ones that need it more than anybody. Whereas the people who are nice, they already show that they feel the most loved. Gosh, it wouldn't be unconditional love if we only loved the nice people. My brother-in-law told me the other day about how much he dislikes his boss, and he explained in detail how he was treated. He asked me what I would do, and I told him from a real love point of view, and he took it as passive and not acceptable. I told him of how I would have handled it in the past, but it didn't make a difference. It was great to walk away from the conversation still happy and not carrying his problems. So wise of you. Often you will try to explain real love to somebody and they look at you like, what? You tell them to be loving and they're like, all they've ever done in their lives is fight. If somebody is walking over them at work, for example, the boss is treating them badly. Look at this. This appears to be sensible. If the boss is stepping on them, they think the only alternative to being stepped on is to what? Stand up and fight back. Have you ever seen that work? I never have. I have never seen fighting back turn out well. Oh, you may feel good for a minute, but it's not going to turn into a great relationship. Loving isn't weak, it is powerful. It takes a real man to be loving and peaceful and kind when somebody's being hateful. And the results are more powerful. It's a weak man who hits somebody else back. And you are wise to see that he couldn't hear that. And if he can't hear that, you just let it go. You were right in describing real love to him, but so what? If somebody can't hear it, being right isn't enough to keep talking. Pleasanton says, can you please review the format and purpose of the Real Love group? What are we meant to do so people don't go home feeling more depleted than before they came? One thing that I would suggest doing is that your group might try looking at the Essentials of Real Love DVDs. They might try looking at those as a group. They might try looking at the Essentials of Real Love workbook. As you complete the workbook together, you'll be telling the truth. You can't avoid it. And so that will keep you away from just whining and complaining. In fact, as you talk about the group being more depleted, if you can give me an example of why you end up more depleted, that will help me, but I can kind of guess, and that is that in many groups tend to be overwhelmed by victims. That is a real common problem. Somebody comes in the group and they start whining. Oh, and this happened to me, and that happened to me, and he did this to me, and oh, woe is me, and blah, blah, blah. And by the end of the group, you want to kill yourself. I mean, it just goes on and on. That whining, that constant victim-y thing needs to be interrupted very early. After somebody's complained for a couple of minutes, don't you kind of get the point? I mean, so my husband does this, and he does that, and he does... Okay, so your husband clearly, I would do this after 90 seconds. So it's pretty obvious from your husband's behavior, is he capable of loving you or not? Yes or no? It's not a multiple choice or fill in the blank. Yes or no? Well, no, he's not capable of loving you. And yet, from your behavior, it's pretty obvious that you keep expecting him to love you. Isn't that right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be mad. I mean, you don't expect the mailman to love you, so he doesn't bother you. It's all about expectations. We don't ever get mad at somebody unless we have an expectation of them. Clearly, mailman doesn't kiss you in the morning, you're not mad because you didn't expect it. Your husband doesn't kiss you in the morning, you're mad because you expected it. So you still expect your husband to love you even though he's shown you no indication that he knows how. So if you keep expecting love from somebody who doesn't know how to give it, who's the moron? Who's the idiot here? That doesn't excuse your husband's behavior. That doesn't make him okay, but he doesn't know how to love you, right? So would you like to learn how to find real love? And then you describe to them how they can do that. So tell me the truth about you. Okay, here's this same group. If someone is feeling low and others are telling them the truth about themselves in too harsh a manner, saying that's attacking, and the person feels attacked themselves. Oh, okay. So you tell me if I'm not understanding you here, okay? So let's say that somebody's telling them the truth about themselves in too harsh a manner. So you're saying that sometimes people in the group tell the truth about somebody else too harshly? Is that the point? You need to help me out here. So this is the person telling the truth about themselves, and you're saying that the group attacks them too hard and says, well, this is what you're doing wrong. If that's what they're doing, notice when I point out the example of her saying, my husband does this and this, we're not telling her what she should do. What we're saying is, do you see how you keep expecting your husband to love you and he can't? Then we say, we would like to invite you to tell the truth about you. Because in all of the million times you've talked about your husband, have you ever been happy? You can keep talking about your husband if you want to, but has it ever worked? Never will. So all we're doing is inviting you to tell the truth about yourself. Now then, the group should not say, oh, well, you're being a victim. We're not into labeling. And in fact, in all the times that I've been in a group, I've even asked people, have you ever heard me use the words getting and protecting behavior? No. I hardly ever use the real love language. We need to understand what it is. But what you say to somebody is, so can you tell the truth about what you do in this relationship? So with your husband, for example, are you unconditionally loving with him? No. And you know, I understand why you wouldn't be. Nobody ever loved you. Notice how there's nothing harsh in here. And you have to be constantly aware of the effect you're having on the other person. See, people often get this kind of like, and I'm sure you've noticed this, it's almost like a voyeuristic thrill of jumping in and labeling what you're doing. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about here. Here you are telling the truth about yourself, and people like go, oh, I know, that's being a victim. You're a victim. No, that's not helpful. It's slowly helping somebody see what they're doing. So when your husband is ugly to you, how do you respond to him? Do you respond to him in an unconditionally loving way? Well, I get angry. And when you get angry at your husband, what does he hear? He hears, I don't love you. Notice I didn't use the words attacking or victim or any of those words. You just help people see that they're being unloving. And then you tell them that you understand why they wouldn't be loving. So you have to be really careful in a group not to attack somebody and make them feel worse. Is this helping you? And I would recommend that you read the book, Real Love for Wise Men and Women, which will help you see how to respond to somebody in a real love group. And please keep coming back to the video chats and asking these questions. And the more specific the examples you can give me, like the more you tell me exactly what you said, the more I can give you examples of what could be said in return. That's really helpful. Carol said, I visited my son recently. I was in the kitchen, but I knew that he slapped his 3-year-old daughter in the dining room for spilling something. I wanted to say something to him later, but I was reluctant to interfere. Should I just stay out of it or say something? I'm concerned that he would consider it interference. He would almost certainly call it interference. And so, if you want to make a difference in your son's life, you show him what love is. That will make more difference than anything else. The more unconditionally loving you become, for example, as you say, you know, when you were a kid, gosh, I would yell at you, I would be disappointed in you. I have sure learned a lot about unconditional loving that would have benefited you as a kid. I wish I'd learned earlier. Then you show him what it's like to unconditionally love your granddaughter. It's as you are loving that it will make the biggest difference to him. Whereas if you say to him, you know, slapping your daughter is not a very good idea, he'll take that as an attack, even if you say it lovingly. So you are wise not to speak. So please bring more questions next week. Be thrilled to have them. We'll take them all. You've had great questions tonight, and the more specific you can ask them, the better, as you've done tonight. So we look forward to seeing you next time, and in the meantime, it's always about real love. See you then.